It is almost the end of a decade, which is absolutely insane. And when I look over this entire decade, some pretty insane things have happened in my life. At the beginning of this decade, I was in grade 10, just at the beginning of high school. And since then, I've graduated from high school, I have 2 college diplomas, and I am sitting here on YouTube making videos for a living. It has been an insane 10 years, but even though all of these memories and things that I've done, some of the things that have stuck with me more than anything else have been the games that I've played over these 10 years. Does that make me a nerd? Yeah, pretty much, but I wanted to actually take a minute and share with you what those 10 favorite games are over the past decade. Now, keep in mind, this list is not going to be the same as any of yours. This is my personal favorite 10 games over the past 10 years, and I would be so interested to hear what yours are, so feel free to let me know down in the comments. I'm super curious to hear what you guys have to say. Now, upon making this list, I didn't realize how hard this was going to be, how many amazing games actually came out over the past 10 years. So, like I said, this is my 10 favorite games. If you disagree, feel free to let me know down in the comments, but there's a lot to talk about here, so without further ado, let me dive in. So I'm going to start out with 3 games that did not quite make my list. The first of which is a Call of Duty game, and believe it or not, there's actually no Call of Duty games on this list, but the game that would be close enough would be Modern Warfare 2. Now, you may be thinking, this game didn't come out in 2010, and you'd be correct. It came out in November 10th, 2009, but I played this game an assload in 2010. It was definitely my most played game throughout 2010. That being said, though, since it wasn't out in this decade, I didn't put it on the list, but it's absolutely my favorite Call of Duty game. The second game, and I'm probably going to get chastised for this, but is The Witcher 3. Now, it's not because I didn't think it should make the top 10, it's because I haven't actually played it. It's actually sitting right beside me on my desk right now, but I just haven't had the time to play it. I truly believe that if I had played it, it would be on this list, but I just haven't dug my jaws into it yet. But don't worry, I will, and who knows, maybe it'll make my top 10 games of the next decade if it's as good as everyone says. And then finally, this one might come as a surprise, but Minecraft. Now, Minecraft probably should be on this list, and out of the entire list I'm giving to you, it's definitely the most influential game, but I actually played it before 2010. I played it in alpha, I played it in beta, and that was before 2010, so technically it was fully released in this decade, but personally to me, it was an older game than that. So yeah, it didn't quite make my list, but as far as influential game goes, it's probably number 1 on this list. Now, moving into the actual top 10. Number 10, Red Dead Redemption 1. Not 2, not GTA 5, Red Dead Redemption 1. This game came out in early 2010, I believe it was in May, and just to give you an idea of the timing of this game, I did not buy this game. I went to Blockbuster to rent it on the first day of summer vacation. So I went in, rented it, and for the next 3 to 5 days, I didn't move. This game drew me in like no other, and all the different gameplay mechanics, being able to slow down time, shoot at people's heads, being able to hog tie ladies and put them on the railroad tracks, this game was just something else for me. And don't get me wrong, I love all of Rockstar's games, but for some reason, this one just holds a special spot in my heart. First of all, the story itself is incredible. By the end of the game, this might be the first video game ever to have me in tears at the end of it. I was so impressed with not only the story, but gameplay of this game, and on top of that, it actually had a pretty decent multiplayer on top of it, before the time of GTA Online, and all in all, this game will always hold a special spot in my heart, and is always going to be my favorite Rockstar game. An open-world, first-person MMO. It sounds like a dream video game to me, and yeah, I know, that is not what Destiny 1 was, but in my opinion, it's the closest thing we've actually got to that. Destiny 1 was a game that, when it was released, personally pulled my attention from everything else I was doing, studying for exams, playing other games, completely away. and all I did day in and day out was play Destiny. And you're going to see that theme a lot from every game that we talk to. Now, don't get me wrong, Destiny had a lot of problems. It was advertised as, well, a first-person MMO, and really wasn't that once it was launched. But still, to me, I had so much fun playing this game. And honestly, it probably wouldn't be on my top 10 games if it wasn't for one thing that they put into the game after launch. And that would be Trials. Once again, Trials had a lot of controversy mixed with it, but at the same time, it's one of the most fun I have ever had in a multiplayer experience, challenging you to be better, and if you were the best, you got amazing rewards. Destiny will always be a game that was fun to me. It may not be the best game ever, it may have had its problems, but to me, it was one of the best games of the decade. Mass Effect 2, a game that was so good, the other two just couldn't stand up to it. As far as Mass Effect 2 goes, it is a story-driven, open-world space game, essentially. And when I say story-driven, I mean extremely story-driven. This is one of the few games where your choices in the game actually do matter. It's not just a couple of different dialogue changes, it's literally who lives and who survives is dependent on what you do in-game. The last mission of this game would affect people in a way that any other mission in any of the games we've talked about today pretty much fail to stand up to, except for a couple. And because this game was so good, when Mass Effect 3 eventually came out, it just couldn't stand up to it. Now, personally, I didn't play Mass Effect 2 until after 3 was out. I bought 1, 2, and 3 all at once and played them in one foul swoop. And I must say, Mass Effect 2 is by far the best of the trilogy, by a long shot, and I think is definitely deserving a spot on the top 10 games of the decade. So if you've looked at all of the games that are already on this list, you probably didn't expect this one to be on there. I'm not a big indie game kind of guy, but this one is probably one of my favorite games, not just in this decade, but ever. It beats out Animal Crossing, it beats out Harvest Moon for me, and I do like these types of games, but this one is just on another level. Not to mention, this entire game was made by not a development studio, but one dude. This is essentially a farming simulator. You can fish, you can mine, do all of these things, but essentially it's a day in the life video game. And each day you have a specific amount of time to complete tasks and a specific amount of energy to do so as well. In doing so, you raise a farm, raise cattle, even raise crops, and by the end of it, you're rich. And honestly, out of any game on this list, I think I have played this one the most over the past decade. Honestly, I love this game, and if you haven't played it, I really highly recommend it. I believe it's out on every console and PC at this point, so just give it a try, but I will say it's by far better on a PC. Over the past decade, my god, has Naughty Dog got their shit together and has just made some incredible games. Uncharted 4 is a perfect example of it, and don't get me wrong, Uncharted 1, 2, and 3 were all fantastic, but with Uncharted 4, they just kind of took it to the next level. The visuals in this game, the gameplay, and of course the story are far none some of the best I have ever seen in a video game. The sound design and just pretty much everything about this game were absolutely on point. Like I said, at this point, Naughty Dog just knows how to make good story and single-player campaigns. And as far as Uncharted 4 goes, it honestly felt more like I was playing a movie than playing a video game. And it seems like for a lot of single-player games, that is kind of the direction that they're pushing towards going forward. And Naughty Dog is absolutely one of those studios pushing it forward. Uncharted 4 is one of my favorite video games ever, and I'm actually kind of surprised after looking at some other people's lists that this isn't on more of them. Yeah, I'm putting a mobile game on this list. Pokemon Go is absolutely a game of the decade, and I think more people should recognize it as one. I remember the day that Pokemon Go came out where I live. Oh my god, I have never seen so many people outside. I've never seen so many people in parks and public locations. It was absolutely a phenomenon that we have never seen before and may never see again. It is the only game of this genre that has ever pushed this many people literally onto the streets. As far as Pokemon Go went, I think there was a lot of problems with the game design in it, but all in all, it got people to play it and it got people talking about it. I remember driving through a mall and actually saw more people walking through the parking lot staring at the phones than when I actually went into the mall. It was a very, very weird time to be going outside, and it was a lot of fun at the same time. It brought people together like I've never seen before in video games, and that's saying a lot because I've been a part of a lot of really big and thriving video game communities, but I've never seen what Pokemon Go did to the world. Breath of the Wild was a breath of fresh air for me. Honestly, I probably wouldn't have a Switch right now if it wasn't for Breath of the Wild. Now, since then, a ton of great games have come out for the Switch, but this was immediately a reason for me to buy it, and my god, was it worth it. Not only just the price of the game, but the price of the Switch too. This game drew me in more than almost any other open world game I have ever played before. Even though it's Zelda and a little bit cartoony, the game was so enthralling, and there's just so much to do in this open world, whether it's just finding the different dungeons and completing the puzzles, or it's just going around and experiencing what the world has to offer. There is so much within Breath of the Wild that makes you just want to play more. Even talking about it now makes me want to re-pick it up and play it all over again. And I have to say, it's definitely in my top 3 Zelda games ever, which is saying a ton. I think the magic of an Elder Scrolls game comes down to the fact that you can play it how you want to. If you want to play a sneaky character, you can do so. If you want to play someone who only uses a bow and arrow, you can do so. If you want to use heavy armor and a two-handed sword, that's up to you. But as far as the game itself goes, there is just so much to do, and the fact that you can do it any way you want to is really where the magic happens. And speaking of magic, you can do that too. And as far as Skyrim goes, there is just so much to do in this game, and to do it whatever way you want to, it makes replaying the game a definite possibility. And because of that, it has sold on pretty much everything, every console that you can imagine over the past 10 years. Honestly, I remember the day that this game came out, I actually had to go on a vacation on that day, but it didn't stop me from going to the midnight release, playing it for 3 hours before I had to get on an airplane and go to the Dominican Republic to sit on a beach. But while I was sitting on that beach, all I could think about was getting back home to play this game. My god, was Skyrim good, and yes, it's caught flack, and over the past decade, Bethesda, especially with Fallout 76, has caught some flack, but I think everyone who's played this game can agree it is very near to a masterpiece. I love puzzle games, and Portal 2 is a puzzle game in more than one way. First of all, throughout the entire story, you're kind of wondering what's going on, and your interaction between the environment and the characters does exactly that. But also, the puzzles themselves are so damn good. Unfortunately, in today's state of the video game community, there is very few really good puzzle games. Portal 2 is one of the few that comes to mind, and one of the few that does it nearly perfectly. Unfortunately, as we know with Valve, we're probably never going to get a Portal 3, but my god, is this game good, and as I talk about it, I very well may go and download this thing and play it again, because thinking back to when I first played this game, I fell in love. And then, in my opinion, the game of the decade goes to The Last of Us. This is very nearly the perfect game in my opinion, and pretty much every time I see a new game come out, in my opinion, they are striving to be The Last of Us. Once again, similar to Uncharted 4, this is another game that almost feels more like you're playing a movie than a game, but at the same time, they do the gameplay mechanics so well that it makes you just want to keep playing the game. Keep trying to figure out exactly what's going on within the story of The Last of Us. To me, The Last of Us 2 is one of the most anticipated games ever after the launch of this game. Honestly, I've never seen a game where in the first 20 minutes of the game, I was very nearly sobbing because the story was already so good, and then it just carries all the way through the entire game. As I mentioned before, pretty much every story I now see in a video game is almost trying to be as good as The Last of Us, and I personally believe very few games have come even close. To me, this game doesn't just sit as one of the best games of the decade, but as one of the best games ever. But of course, if you guys disagree with me, you can feel free to let me know what your top 10 games are, or maybe just game of the decade is, down in the comments below. I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, I'd appreciate it if you could hit that like button. But guys, I hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and until the next decade, peace out.